Thanks, Mark, and thanks to PACE and Clean Water Fund for putting this all together. I'm going to tell a little story today about the work that we've done under our Clean Energy Action Plan, which we published in 2014. So it's just kind of a 6-year story. And I know we're here to talk about schools. This plan covered town buildings and schools as well, and I'll add some footnotes that'll be school specific, but it's kind of a general overview. Just an outline for the presentation. I'll give you an update on the progress, and then I'll show you what I call my family photos, and these are pictures of a lot of our solar installations in town, and talk about the evolution there. And then what I hope to get to is really what I want you all to try to take away is some of the lessons we've learned in putting this program through its paces over the years. This slide is going to kind of give you the progress, and I'm here, representing the work of the town, but I'm really lucky, and we didn't coordinate this, but 3 of my co-conspirators here from the task force are in the audience. I'm not going to ask you to stand up, but raise your hands. Mary Hogue, Bob Wall, and Daphne Dixon. So we've got a great team of advocates in Fairfield. We're all volunteers, but then we're really blessed in our Public Works Department to have Ed Bowman, and Ed Bowman is the guy that's the town employee that is making all of this happen, and we're kind of cheerleading on the side and sharing all of Ed's great work. So this is just an example of what I'll call a summary here. We're now very excited that our solar projects are getting up in the neighborhood of 30% of our energy usage, and 25 to 30, and when you add in the fuel cell projects, some of this is maybe a little predictive. I think Bob probably knows one of our fuel cells is not quite online yet, and it's associated with the microgrid. And then one thing our volunteers in the room have done is we've done our community solar programs. We've gone through 4 rounds of Solarize or Solarize-like programs. And then we're now up to over 50 EV charging stations because we just got a big bank of Tesla superchargers in Fairfield right on the I-95 rest area. But we have 26 level 1 EV chargers in our schools, in our 2 high schools, and those are for students to be able to plug in their cars when they're there. And we're, I think, getting close to saving $3 million a year from clean energy projects. About a quarter of that is from our solar energy projects. The majority comes from fuel conversions and energy efficiency. So let's get to the family photos. We started, of course, with the low-hanging fruit, which is doing the roofs, and generally try to do roofs that are less than 10 years of age. When it's 20 years old, we're probably going to stay away from it, but in that maybe 10 to 15, or maybe sometimes a little more than 15, it'll depend on the roof condition before we decide to go forward with a roof project. This is I think one of the very first ones we did. It's on the Fairfield Theater Company, not a school, but it's a building that the town owns. Fairfield has exclusively used the power purchase agreement model for our solar projects, and so everything that we've done with renewable energy has been done with no investment. Now there were a couple little early projects where we got grants that were like the 3 megawatts that Peter was talking about, but the big projects have all been done through a PPA model. I said, yeah, 3 kilowatts. Thank you, not 3 megawatts. Sorry. And once we got good at doing roofs, we started to move to ground mounts. This is a ground mount system at our tennis center. And then we learned that when you have the contractor out there doing a PPA install for a solar project, and they were doing all the trenching and the wiring, why not go ahead and add EV chargers to the project? We did a lot of EV chargers through the Connecticut DEEP grant, and basically the grant would cover the cost of the infrastructure, and the install was basically kind of buried in with the PPA, and really was kind of essentially a free way to put EV chargers in. We loved the way that some of our projects have integrated into the landscape at Fairfield, and this is one that's at our softball field, and that right field used to be a little bit of a short shot. Some of the big left-handers could put it out pretty easy when I played in the men's over 35 league. But we put these solar panels up, and I get a little close, and you got a big net protecting them. So now we've got our own green monster, and we've got a lot of Red Sox fans in town, so they love this. Got a good mix. We moved on to carport projects, and this has been some of our more, I'll say, controversial work has been related to carport projects, because they're a lot more visible to the neighbors that are nearby. And this is the first one we did. It didn't actually go very well because the town just kind of put it together and started installing it and didn't tell the neighbors about it. And that's when some folks got kind of angry about it. So it was a lesson learned. And after that, the task force got really, really actively involved in advocating these projects and communicating it to the public. Yeah.
Just so some pushback we've gotten in the town of Cheshire is that our school roofs don't have the structural integrity. Did you experience that at all in Fairfield in a significant way?
Not at all. No.
Because I imagine our 1950s, I imagine the schools are probably similar.
Yeah. Okay. No, it was always just around the roof membrane condition. Yeah, and that was the main factor, but structure was not an issue. Okay. Yeah. And again, EV chargers go really well with these carports and makes the install super simple. I mentioned on the first slide, and I didn't read off all those bullets, but one of the projects that Ed did was to put together a microgrid for our critical town infrastructure, so that I'd put this under the category of resiliency. And it basically covers our police department, our fire department, our homeless shelter, and our emergency operations shelter. And this is a great way of making a community resilient by keeping those critical features up and running during a power outage. Probably the smartest thing they did was make sure also that the cell phone tower is up and running when the power goes out, so we love that. This is our biggest install in town, and when I first went out to try to photograph, I had actually 5 photos like this. It's something like 4,000 panels on our landfill, but then luckily one of our task force members' sons has a drone, so we sent him up, and that's our 1.3 megawatt array. This is actually a behind-the-meter project that connects into our wastewater plant. And the wastewater plant is going to be a part of our second microgrid, and essentially between the solar and the anticipated fuel cell projects and some energy efficiency upgrades, this is the single largest power consumer in town, and it will become net zero. It uses, I think, about 6,000 to 7,000 million kilowatt hours a year. So let's talk about schools. And as I mentioned, the carport projects, because they're so visible and they're pretty big structures, and some of our schools are very neighborhoody, we had to do, our volunteers had to do a lot of community outreach to make sure that the neighbors were comfortable, and we presented different options, and what does it look like with trees? What does it look like in the winter when the trees don't have leaves on them? What does it look like? We literally did renderings from individual neighbors' houses so that they could see what it would look like from their house with and without leaves. We had things where we showed examples of what it would look like if we put certain types of screening. Bob and Mary and Daphne went door to door and talked to all the neighbors and showed them our fact sheets and got them to sign petitions on behalf of the project, supporting the project, so we could go in with a stack of neighbor petitions to community meetings and to the vote saying, look, this is what the neighbors have done, this is what the community has done, and how supportive these projects. At the end, the only real objection, it's not a cost because it's, again, a PPA, the only real objection is aesthetics. People think that, boy, it's too industrial, or we're worried about how it's going to make our neighborhood look. Projects, of course, got approved. We did a megawatt on our 2 high schools. This is a finished example of the other high school, Fairfield Ludlow. And as you could see, we had done in 2017, we had done the roof already. That was making about a third of the school's power. And then we did the carports in 2018. That makes another third. So the high schools are number 2 and 3 power users in Fairfield. And we're making about 2/3 of the electricity from solar there.
I would think that there's a huge advantage because now your car or vehicle or truck is protected with snow, ice. So, I mean, it's a covered area that's, I mean, everyone would love to have a covered. I guess, is there a snow issue, maintenance issue with those? Because we're considering those in North Haven.
We have not had any issues with them. And we have right now 4 carports in town. We have 3 or 4 more that we're building this summer. And that was a big topic of discussion, right? And I would direct everyone in the room, if you're thinking of carports, we've got a great series of fact sheets that we've put together for each of these projects, but the fact sheets have on the back of them, we have about 30 or 40 FAQs, and it goes through, you know, snow, it goes through what happens if kids climb on them, what happens if softballs hit them, because that other one you would see was next to a baseball field. This one, I'll actually point out an interesting story. The principal of the school said, well, I'm a little worried about putting these carports up because I like to see what's going on in my student parking lot. I want to know if anyone's doing anything that they shouldn't be doing. And the original design had that middle spot covered with panels as well, and there was a carport there. And we did a rendering from the first floor and the second floor and the third floor of the schools to show what it would look like for the principal to look out on the parking lot. And he was right, it blocked his view. But we found when we moved that one, he could see everything underneath, and he said, this is good. And he said, all right, go ahead. Plus, we wrapped in security cameras, so the police station, it's all hardwired into our police station because they were worried about, you know, active shooter stuff and what happens if someone's using these to screen their combatants coming to attack our school. Well, now everything's covered with cameras. They have better visibility than they had before.
What's the capacity of this?
This is 400 megawatts carports, and sorry, my day job, I'm working on a 400 megawatt in Australia right now, but 400 kilowatts.
What is total?
This one is 600 kilowatts. This one is 400 kilowatts, carports.
And will those power the EV charging stations? I mean,
It's all grid tied behind the meter. Yep.
What's the total for the whole high school together?
You know, I'm afraid I don't remember what the roof was, but I think it was in the order of 400 kilowatts as well.
Why
So
did
you
you
could,
choose,
oh, I'm sorry.
why did you choose the carport, the previous one, the carport instead of the roof?
The roof was already done. The rendering just didn't show it. This is a rendering, and they just didn't draw it on there. Yeah. If you go to Google and look up Ward High School, you'll see the whole roof was already covered.
So
And these are
you've
all-
had pretty good luck getting renewable energy credits, because we've had that problem where we have a desire to put solar on school rooftops and then not winning enough.
Yeah, I kind of went over what a PPA is before. Well, I didn't go over what it is. I'm kind of assuming everyone knew that. But a PPA, basically the contractor that builds these solar projects handles all of the financing, they handle all the incentives, they handle the construction, the insurance, the operation, the ownership. They own the system. All the town does is agree to give you the space, right? Here, use my roof. Here, use my parking lot. And they agree to buy the power. And the power that they buy from these projects is less than what they pay the grid. So there's zero, I can't say this too many times, there's zero capital invested by the town, and they just simply save money and go green.
But the renewable energy credits are a separate issue that PPA, that contractor has to
Yep.
win. And I guess I'm wondering.
Yeah, these were all done
Very successful.
all done with ZREX. Every one of these projects had ZREX, all 30 of them.
Lose to other bidders in any of the projects or have any problem with that? Because that's what we're having trouble with.
They kept the rest.
I don't recall any of our contractors applying and not being successful. There may have been some cases where they were that I wasn't aware of, but pretty much once the way it would work is the town they would come up with an idea, hey, we'd like to do this school roof, or we'd like to do this carport, and the town would say, sure, go ahead, apply for the ZREC. And I don't recall any examples where they were not successful.
It's interesting.
There's a really good, on your website, there's a really good perspective on describing this from one of the vendors, I thought. It was really
Okay.
helpful, so
Thank you.
go through that.
I've still got 10 minutes, right? Okay, I was just trying to keep track of time. Yes?
If you're at an earlier stage in your community, which one of these would you recommend in terms of how easy it was to get it through and show the impact? The second question is, did you run an RFP for your PPAs and how many firms responded?
Yeah. So clearly the low-hanging fruit is doing the rooftops, and the best value, because the structure's already there, is doing the rooftops. So you're going to save more money. But once we're pretty much out of roof space, we've not done every roof, but we've done every roof that is viable in terms of the age and condition of the roof. In terms of the RFP process, it was done very early on, and actually that's a perfect segue to my next slide, which are kind of what I would call the key reasons that we've been successful in Fairfield. And of course, having that, if you think back to the first slide, we wrote that plan in 2014, and that was something our volunteers did, actually. The town didn't do that. We did that. Bob and Mary, Daphne and I wrote that plan. It set the framework for our town Public Works Department to move ahead. And so early on, they had a competition where they selected some key vendors that became partners. So one of the ideas was to really make this a business-friendly approach. And so allowing the solar contractors and the developers to come forward and make proposals to the town established criteria, which was quite simply, as long as it's not going to cost us any money, and as long as it can prove that it will save us money, we can accept the project. And so the savings, we use very conservative criteria. One of them was the cost that we would pay for power in year one would have to be less than what we're paying for grid power. Okay, so that's kind of really simple. We don't want to pay more than we're paying the utility. That's satisfied, in the terms of the town legal department, satisfied the competition requirement, right? So someone can make an offer to sell power to the town from one of these arrays. As long as it was less than grid power, the town could accept that offer. But to be really conservative, going back to, I think, our Yankee roots here in Fairfield, that PPA has to be flat for 20 years. So many solar companies will provide an escalator. The common one they like to use is 2.9% for some reason, because that tracks below what the average utility increase is. Fairfield won't accept that. It has to be flat for 20 years. So we're going to pay less in year one, and if by some miracle grid power doesn't go up, which was what the argument was against allowing escalators. If the grid power doesn't go up, we're still ahead of the game. But really, this is the best part, because we are locked in on all of these projects for 20 years. And the savings is going to be enormous in year 10, 15, 20. So those were kind of the key, basic, fundamental decisions. We're all, Mary, Bob, Daphne, and I, we're all environmentalists, and many of you in this room are environmentalists, but we always lead with the economic argument, which is simple. We're not going to spend any of the town's money, and we're not going to cost you any money. We're going to save money. Very simple. Lead with those economic arguments first. With the schools, and you'll see a lot about our 3 E's, it's of course, economic, it's environmental, but then we really emphasize the educational aspect. And so the solar projects that we've done in the schools have the ability for the teachers to access the data that can be downloaded. They can use it for teaching in their schools. And over the years, I've gone in and presented to the environmental science classes. We've done presentations at the elementary schools as well, trying to get the kids while they're young recently formed a Sustainable Youth CT group in Fairfield, and those kids are working on their own initiatives like Skip the Straw, and there's another one that they're working on, Skip the Meat, right. So, good stuff. One of the things that I'm going to hit number 4 here, one of the things that we learned very early on is in those neighborhood meetings, knocking on doors, you will learn things. Don't ever approach your stakeholders like you know more than them, because everybody has an opinion, everybody has a perspective, and I guarantee if you really, really open your ears and listen, you will learn things and you'll make the projects better. And that's something that I think we've done really, really well, is to truly, truly listen to our stakeholders. And of course, we want to share the good news, and you know, one of the ways we're doing this is we got together with Westport 2 years ago, and we formed Sustainable Fairfield County. And so now we're collaborating monthly as a group with, 18 communities. Daphne spearheads it. She runs the meetings, and all of Fairfield County is participating, and it's pretty active. I think I saw Alex in the back here from Greenwich. There you are. Hello. And is anybody else here from Fairfield County? Yeah, so a lot of us here. All right, good. And it's fun. We're working on, and that's a good segue, we're working on countywide composting initiatives and sharing lessons learned there, and then electric school buses. So let me talk about that. So I showed all of the family photos, these beautiful solar arrays, but one thing I like to say is the best form of clean energy is the energy you don't use, right? So it's energy efficiency, and it's not as glamorous as the drone photos of the solar arrays, but it's the nuts and bolts of really, really getting this done, and I'm really thrilled to hear the discussion that's happening around this. Ed Bowman, this is his big thing for 2020. He is embarking upon a very ambitious energy services performance contract initiative. Don't quote me on this. I think he shared that it was about a $15 million capital project. It's going to have some very ambitious goals to bring our clean energy usage up by another 20%. So he's starting at 55, bring that up to 75. They're looking at more renewable energy, looking at some energy storage, because one of the things that's really driving our electric bills now, because we've done so much with renewable energy, it's those doggone demand charges. Those demand charges are really, they keep climbing at a faster rate than everything else, so we're gonna work on addressing those. So Ed's real big focus right now is on this energy performance contract. Us volunteers are spending a lot of our focus, and I think hopefully this is a good segue for you, Daphne, because I think you're going to talk about this some more, but we're spending a lot of our focus on clean transportation. And I think, as you all know, transportation emissions are really, really our big issue in Connecticut, one of our biggest issues. Globally, transportation greenhouse gas emissions sector is about 14%, and I think in the US, it's something like 32%. In Connecticut, we're close to 40% because we're so suburban, so sprawling. We like our cars, we like our big cars. Lots of bad things about our transportation sector in this state. And so we started organizing the what used to be called the EV Showcase. It's now called the Green Wheels Expo. And we get owners, we get dealers to come and display their electric vehicles. And we had a good showing the first year, and it's gotten bigger and bigger every year. And Daphne and Mary really dig into this to promote the event. And Daphne's got a team of volunteers, interns, I should say, that work with her. It's now, and we're really proud of this, it's become the biggest electric car event in the Northeast. This event in Fairfield that's held every September, thank you, is it's bigger than Boston's, it's bigger than New York's, so we're really proud of it. We can't compete with LA and San Diego yet, but we'll get there someday. Theirs are actually about an order of magnitude bigger than ours. But one of the things that we did this year is we brought an electric school bus up from White Plains. And we invited our Board of Education members to come out, our school operations facilities people to come out. They brought their kids, they got on the bus, they talked to the driver of the bus, and in a this was a photo, another drone photo taken at our event in September. 2 months later, we were putting out our RFP for student transportation services. It's a 5-year contract for the busing company to provide all of the busing for all of our schools, and we put in 10 electric buses into that contract. The negotiations right now are underway to select the final provider, but we're really, really hopeful that we're going to have electric buses. The bus depot is on the other side of town from this, and it's an open lot. We're going to put another 1 megawatt solar array, and that will piggyback all of the 10 EV chargers that we need for the buses. Yeah.
Are you gonna bring the electric school bus back again this year with the driver? Because I'd love to do a little videotape just for my town. This is how being quiet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Have you thought about bringing it back, or?
You know, he's getting a lot of requests, and so we feel like we're going to try to bring him back, but we also feel like we should share the wealth because they've been really, it was the city of White Plains, very, very generous with their time. Sure. The contractor there is National Express Transit, and yeah.
So Bridgeport is doing 2 electric city buses, and they cost more than twice as much as a diesel-powered bus. Do you have any knowledge about the extra cost for a school bus?
Yeah, it's about twice as much. And so the way we're going to try to make this work is we're applying some of the companies that have bid on the services contract, because the town just requests the services. It doesn't own the buses. So they are going to apply for grants, which could cover 40% of the cost. But then the town is going to provide the power through the new solar array, so there will be no fuel costs for the buses. And then when you factor in the reduced maintenance, and we're coordinating with Connecticut Green Bank to try to get the appropriate financing and amortization of the capital costs of those buses, we do think it'll fall in line with the typical operating cost of a diesel bus, even though the capital is much higher.
Do you have any idea of what the range is in miles or hours?
Yeah, that's a bus from Lyon, and that bus is a 65-mile range. And this is actually something we debated. We might have needed, they do have buses that go up to 150 to 160 miles of range. And with Fairfield, we run 3 routes. There's a high school route, then there's a middle school route, and then there's a elementary school route, and then they reverse it in the afternoon. We might have needed to cover the worst case, the longer range bus, but that would have been even more expensive. So we opted to allow the shorter range buses because the idea is I think we're the first town to try to do this in Connecticut with the electric school buses. So we didn't want to make the cost gap too high that we needed to try to cover.
Do you know how winter weather or hilly conditions impact the range?
Winter weather, like really, really cold conditions are definitely going to impact the range. I think similar to what an EV is. You know, an electric vehicle, you'll get about 60% of your range in the coldest days of the winter, and then it kind of scales up from there. But one of the things we love about this is, and when I presented, I have a whole nother slide deck that I gave to the Board of Ed to show some of our curbs in town and the diesel staining from the school buses idling there while they're waiting for the next route to begin. If you notice, they never shut them off in between routes in the winter. They sit there and idle. It's spewing diesel emissions. It's creating black soot all over our town. And the worst thing is it's into the lungs of our most sensitive receptors. So we made that argument to the Board of Ed.
The school, they're breaking the damn law.
Yeah. And on the coldest days, they have to actually start warming these buses up 2 hours before the route starts, right? So,
Definitely.
So Middletown actually also just got a VW for electric school buses.
good.
Yeah, I want to talk briefly, since we're in Middletown. Middletown has actually won the first electric school bus in the state. It's only one, but it's exactly the issue you spoke of, that it costs so much more that even though we've gotten money through the VW mitigation fund, it still costs significantly more. So the local bus company that supplies buses to the town, which is called DATCO, had to be willing to bite the bullet and pay more up front. Okay, so Middletown has started that process. In the past, all of these VW mitigation funds have gone for clean diesel. Okay, so this is the first time the DEEP and the governor have actually approved of an electric school bus coming through these funds through DEEP, and it's coming to Middletown in the spring.
Never mind the fact that the initial cost was twice.
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at the life
Well,
cycle?
the problem, I just want to speak very briefly. The problem with the life cycle is that the city of Middletown pays this company for the service. But the savings of not buying fuel will accrue to the town itself, not to the bus company that buys the bus. So a different sharing mechanism for paying for this is going to have to be put in place to get more than one. So it's a complicated issue.
What I'd like to announce is today's topic is schools, which of course gets into school buses, but there's so much going on with electric school buses and electric vehicles. Our next session, which will be in April, we want to focus on transportation. So let's go into these financing, the grants, in a lot more detail next time.
And I'll make it very clear, this is aspirational, this is a work in progress. The bid went out, we got the bids. Will it actually get funded and contracted? That remains to be seen. I think I'm out of time, right? All right, thank you.